Hey folks, it's Kirk Langford, General Manager of Unique Training and Development and Frontline Leadership Systems USA, and we're here with another episode of Leader Feeder. Suzanne is taking a much well-deserved break, and so you're stuck with just me, but I think we'll see how it goes, and I'm sure we'll have a good time and learn a little bit in the process. So Leader Feeder is all about helping you learn to be a better leader with a little bit less stress, sharing leadership tips with you and your team. And today we want to talk about the idea of how can you improve communication on the production floor. So one of the topics that we get asked about the most from all of our clients really is that idea of communication. And I think a lot of people who are in leadership development or have had leadership development would tell you that communication in many ways is the backbone of good leadership skills. Because if you're not communicating, if you're not helping others communicate, there's going to be communication breakdowns. And so much of what we do as a leader, it really is communication. And so I wanted to share just a couple of tips with you that I think are really practical and helpful for frontline leaders, and even those that might be, further up the chain, managers and so on. So the first tip I want you to think about is plan the message. And by that I mean, ask yourself, what do you want people to think? What do you want people to feel? Or what do you want them to do as a result of your communication? So your default communication may not be as effective as you think, and taking a moment to plan your communication is going to ensure a more thoughtful, coherent, and kind of consistent message. We have lots of leaders that during our training, they say, yeah, I'm definitely more abrasive than I'd like to be, or maybe not more abrasive than I'd like to be, but I'm more abrasive than I can be because working with other people, I come off as rude when I don't mean to. So I've had to think about how can I change my message to show that I am supporting you, I am listening, I'm here for you, rather than come off as I'm annoyed with you, I'm upset with you, I'm frustrated with you when I'm communicating. So taking a little bit of time to say, what's the tone I want my message to have and convey? What are the actual words, right? What do I want to say and what do I want them to remember? So think about, I'm about to communicate with someone. What do I want them to think, do, or feel as a result? And then that will help you build out the actual communication that you give, okay? Second part is I want you to think about the environment. And this is really still part of that first tip, which is planning for the communication. But think about the environment. A lot of manufacturing and production environments are loud, they're noisy, there's a lot of stuff going on, you've got forklifts flying by you. So choosing that environment is really important. You got to think about, okay, for example, are people going to be wearing PPE? Are they going to be wearing earmuffs or earplugs? So when I'm communicating with them, I'm going to have to think about, am I speaking loudly enough that he can even hear? For people who may not speak English as their first language, when you couple that language barrier on with, earplugs or earmuffs, then you really might make it difficult, or they might have a lot of trouble understanding the message. So how can I ensure that I'm communicating in a way that's clear, but also in a place that makes that communication as easy as possible? As an example, we were doing a site visit with a client, and they had a kind of group huddle of almost 100 people. And the person at the front, they had a microphone system, which we thought, oh, that's awesome. We thought, look at this. They've got a microphone system. They've thought about this. But then the people that were using the microphone were holding it down here because they either weren't really taught how to use it, or maybe they felt it was a bit embarrassing, or what I hear a lot of is, oh, I'm loud enough. And so people would hold the microphone down here and you couldn't hear anything through the speaker. And so just curious to know how it was going, I kind of slid to the back of the room just to see, and I could hardly hear anything. Now, I don't know if my hearing's 100% or not, but I could hardly hear anything from the back of the room because the room they were doing the meeting off of was just off of the main production area. So it was quite noisy, even though there wasn't any production happening in that specific room. So you start to see how even though you might make some considerations or get a microphone system, you got to actually use these tools to make sure that everyone's understanding. So that's the next piece is, plan out the environment. Make sure that you're thinking about, is the communication going to be understood and heard because of the location we're using, all right? So next tip, effective communication isn't a one-way street. And by that, I mean, when we talk about planning the message, you often plan how the conversation is going to go from a one-way perspective, kind of a monologue. Okay, here's what I'm going to tell them. Here's what I want them to think or feel. But we don't always calculate or add to the calculation that they might want to have a response of some sort, right? They might want to ask a question. They might want to, they might have an objection to what you're asking them to do or what you're telling them. So you want to make sure that when you're thinking about this communication, you're remembering that communication goes two ways. And so one of the ways you can do that is be ready to ask questions. right? Be ready to ask questions and also be ready to receive questions, receive objections, receive questions, receive explanations for why we do something a certain way, whatever it might be. So get ready to receive those, but also get ready to ask, and then actually get ready to listen. So be ready to ask a question that might help you understand whether or not everybody understood. So, hey, I know that was a lot of information in a short amount of time. Can you walk me through what you understood? I just want to make sure that we're on the same page. Doesn't come off as, in that way, it's not condescending. It's, read it back to me so I know you're not an idiot. It's really, hey, I want to make sure that I communicated effectively. And so I'm just asking you to tell me what you remembered or what you heard to make sure that, the instructions I've given you were as clear as they could have been. As a side note, one of the jobs that we have as frontline leaders is to relentlessly remove ambiguity. I'll say that again, relentlessly remove ambiguity. And our communication is a big, big way that we do that. So we want to make sure that as much as possible, our communication is removing as much ambiguity as we feel is necessary to make sure the job's going to get done in the way we want it to get done. And then the last tip really coincides with tip number 3 about making sure that you are aware that communication is a two-way street and that it's not just me telling you stuff and then walking away. Be ready to listen and don't interrupt. Something we see a lot of in frontline leadership situations is people get interrupted or get cut off a lot. And if you've ever been cut off or interrupted yourself, you know how frustrating that is. If you're trying to make a point or get to a point, it can be really annoying to have someone cut you off, especially if they're your leader. I know I do this myself from time to time. I'm sure my team will tell you it's frustrating, but I try to limit it to really thinking to myself, I'm about to cut you off. Maybe if I keep listening, you'll clarify the thing that I was going to ask anyway, or you'll say the thing that I felt that I was going to need to add on without me needing to do it. So it is challenging, especially if we feel like someone's kind of droning on and we go, okay, how do I, get them to get to the point? But as much as possible, try not to interrupt people. Let them talk. You're going to learn a lot about how they're thinking about things and their way of understanding by hearing it in their own words. So those are my 4 tips. Plan out the message. Make sure you think about the environment that you're delivering the message in or the communication. Make sure that effective communication is a two-way street, so you're allowing the other person to ask questions, raise objections, and last but not least, don't interrupt. So those are my 4 tips for improving production floor communication. I'd love to hear if you have other tips. I'm sure lots of you do from all the experience you have on the production floor. Share them in the comments below. We want to hear what your top tips are for improving production floor communication. And with that, keep in mind that that might be your starting point, these couple of tips, but you might need a bit more of a robust leadership development and communication development skills for your leadership team and your frontline leaders. In that case, we would love to have a conversation with you. You can head to our website, uniquedevelopment.com. You can also find us on social media, usually just searching Unique Development or Unique Leadership. Find us, drop us a message, and we'd love to have a chat about how we can help you improve your leadership development and specifically the communication skills of your frontline leaders.